Thank you for joining me. I'm RJP, a passionate fan of The Legend of Zelda. And while you're here, I would like to express some of my fascination with Breath of the Wild. Every time I return to this game, it feels like home. Everything I wanted The Legend of Zelda to become, with an atmosphere more intriguing than ever. Trying to capture how I feel about this game using only words is quite a challenge by itself. Because of that, I decided to go the extra mile and further show my appreciation through animation. In my efforts, I will attempt to explain what it is about this game that resonated with me so perfectly. So, whether you're a veteran to the series or new to the whole adventure, welcome, and please enjoy my Muse of the Wild. There is no introduction needed for The Legend of Zelda. Since 1985, this titan of the video games industry has filled countless childhoods with the spirit of adventure. The simple idea of a young hero getting lost wandering around a sprawling and diverse landscape, coming across new villages and niche corners of the world packed with secrets, puzzles, treasures, all begging to be excavated. Then, the more you experience in each subsequent game, the more you discover a mythology of sorts, where each game's story all tie into a larger narrative. The tales of the three goddesses of creation and false deities in pursuit of their sacred relic known as the Triforce. The goddess Hylia reborn in her mortal form and the reincarnation of her chosen hero, only awakened in times of pure turmoil as an answer to the corruption of the Curse of Demise. And then you get this thing, the timeline. Let's just not go there yet. For a long time, my game of choice was Twilight Princess, as this was my true introduction to the series and I was immediately hooked. With all that said, while it's easy to let the imagination go crazy with the lore and the backstories, when it comes to the actual games, I don't think it's unwarranted to say they were going through a bit of a decline as time went on. Most of the early Zelda games were driven by the discovering of new items, whether it be within a set course or somewhere you had to go out of your way to find. Sure, none of the games truly let you go anywhere you want, minus Zelda 1, but even a set path rarely took away the additional freedom you had with the various ways items and weapons are used. If you found something cool, you then, by proxy, had another cool way to kill enemies and solve puzzles. This was well established in the first few entries, but then as technology grew and Nintendo adapted with it, in their own ways, Zelda games changed. With each release, Zelda games became more reliant on discovering new areas and key items sequentially to move the plot forward, along with gimmicky mechanics with said items. In other words, they became more linear, transitioning away from the open-ended nature of discovering tucked-away dungeons and key items out of order into a more plot-focused and character-driven format. When I think back and try to pinpoint when this transition really began, my mind always jumps to one game: Ocarina of Time. While Zelda games were initially about the solo adventure of the boy clad in green, and our perception of the world around him is only seen through his experiences, after the advancements in storytelling made in Ocarina of Time, we began to see more depth to the NPCs' backstories, as well as those of particular locations, like Kakariko being the home of the Sheikah tribe and the homes of the various races of Hyrule. Here, we were given our first real explanation of things like the Hylian Civil War and the story of creation, how the three goddesses made the world, all that stuff I mentioned earlier. It was clear, and it's nothing new to say, that Ocarina of Time is when the Zelda team took the next step in making this legend a grand one. This is evident in the game that immediately followed Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, which arguably has some of the most depth in its character you would find in a Zelda game, including that of Link himself. This is interesting to me because while capable of telling great stories and still maintaining some level of freedom, the pacing of these games became very predictable. Loyal Zelda fans would still see the beauty in the cracks, but by the time of the Wii U and 3DS generation, it was just undeniable that there was something missing. Some itch that Zelda just hadn't scratched yet, despite its list of accomplishments. Of course, side quests are a fun diversion, and the aforementioned linearity was made up for with fun mechanics, even if gimmicky, a variety of environment themes, and an epic tale to experience, always. They're staples in Zelda games, and many of them stand out. Again, notably those in Majora's Mask, where the stories and abilities of the masks can outshine the main plot of the game itself. I believe this is a major reason why Majora's Mask is looked back on so fondly. It was the response to the pinnacle of Zelda storytelling and gameplay while maintaining a strong identity of its own. Yet it was followed by a shift to games with less freedom of exploration or a flawed execution of it, and sometimes overindulgence in story. This all eventually culminated into Skyward Sword, the game that might have one of the best stories to tell, but is remembered mostly for the egregious hand-holding without much in between. This is where that itch really started to settle in. The itch for something bigger, something more. But what more could Zelda games do? We got more stories on larger scales, more personality in our characters and environments, more varied weapons and tools to navigate the world with, and despite the shortcomings, we still saw a decent amount of technical prowess, or at the very least some noteworthy experimenting. Of course, the limitations of the consoles and Nintendo's overall philosophy on game design meant they weren't really primed to make games that matched the complexity of something like Final Fantasy or Metal Gear or Tomba. Still, it'd be wrong to say Zelda was 100% stuck in its old ways, even if they managed to do what Nintendo do whenever they try anything new. Take A Link Between Worlds. Here's an example of Nintendo slightly tweaking the mold in favor of not only a new experience, but one that harkens back to that feeling of being driven by discovery and experimenting. Ravio's shop lets you rent any item in the game right away, which then lets you literally play the game's dungeons in any order you desire. Despite these efforts, from the N64 all the way up to the Wii U and 3DS, this confined formula was to be expected of The Legend of Zelda. This was the Zelda formula, and it was simultaneously responsible for the rise and plateauing of the franchise. If any game had the right to attempt to redefine its entire legacy and the industry around it, The Legend of Zelda is a top contender in that regard. Now, I don't mean to say I speak for every Zelda fan, and I can't continue to speak for others by saying this, but I personally longed for a Zelda title that would blend all the series' best mechanics and story elements into a single, fully realized experience that could hold itself up against modern-day giants. I know that was a tangent and a bit of a hot take on the entire Zelda franchise, but it only comes from a loving retrospect, and this is all relevant towards my appreciation for the topic of this video. Enter Breath of the Wild. Starting in late 2011, small bits of insight were drip-fed over the span of 3 years about how the developers are rethinking the conventions of Zelda, questioning their traditions and challenging themselves to create the most ambitious entry to date. In 2014, we were given a promise from Nintendo, directly from Aonuma. Forget everything you know about The Legend of Zelda, because it's all gonna change. E3 2014 gave us our first looks at the game, and finally, in 2017, the world was bestowed this magnificent return to glory. I, for one, could not have been more ready. The Legend of Zelda most special to me is Breath of the Wild, because it truly is the game I've been waiting for all along. There's a variety of topics I can easily go off on a tangent with when it comes to this game, so to keep things simple, let's start with what I believe are the heart and soul of Breath of the Wild, and to some extent, all of Zelda. Some of the charm of Zelda games comes from the way each one attempts to paint a picture greater than the sum of its parts. While they usually manage to achieve the illusion of a sprawling fantasy environment with a rich history, Breath of the Wild has taken that idea straight to its core, using the sheer size of the world as a vehicle to drive your adventure in as many different directions as possible. This time around, your abilities are necessary not because the game is literally walled off from you and prevents you from progressing before meeting certain criteria, nor because of the urgency to see the next cutscene or the next plot point unfold. This world is actively encouraging you to pave your own way forward, or fail trying. The only serious progression gate is met right at the start of the game, the Great Plateau. Though even this fraction of the map feels massive upon first arrival, and it's nothing short of a genius way of giving a tutorial for a game like this. Upon leaving the Shrine of Resurrection for the first time, you were bound to pick up a stick or two conveniently placed for you to find. Your first weapons. They only take a few swings to break, but they get the job done for now. Immediately down the road, you see a mysterious old man sitting by a fire. After a brief discussion about apples, axes, and arson, he points you in the direction of some weird structure over in the distance. I don't know, hold your slate up to it or something, see what happens. Here he gives you the task of completing your first handful of shrines, and in doing so, unlocking your Sheikah Slate runes. Magnesis, Stasis, Cryonis, and bombs. Permanent bombs. These single best inclusion in this game. Fight me about it. These runes are the keys to opening your mind to the possibilities being presented, as are the weapons you've become acquainted with so far. Finally, you earn the sailcloth after the old bastard has his fun running you around the plateau. Then goes, hey, by the way, I'm the king, or rather, I was. I've been dead for 100 years, and Zelda needs your help. We all kinda do, really. After that well-needed bit of insight, you fly down to Greater Hyrule. Now you're left with a few more direct objectives to guide you, but otherwise, you're on your own. Nobody is there to remind you to go in any direction, and the landscape is begging to be traveled in every direction. Once you land in Hyrule Field that first time, it feels like Nintendo steps to the side and says, now you're ready, whether you are or not. The feeling I got at this moment is hard to explain. It was surreal. Leading up to the game's release, of course it was heavily expressed how massive this game world is and how much freedom we'd have in it, but nothing could express that more than jumping off the plateau that very first time. Sure, I was told where to go and shown how to get to important landmarks, and I was immediately given a quest list to keep me on track, but despite that, nothing stopped the rest of the world from being actively ready for me to discover it. Like I and many others have, you could easily spend dozens upon dozens of hours exploring and soaking in this game before even stepping foot in Kakariko to move forward with the main quest. Or just, fuck it, don't bother. Head for Ganon before even meeting Impa. If you want to head straight out and find other settlements before Kakariko, despite what your quests are directing you to do, you absolutely have that choice. From this point forward, this is your story.
That's what an open world game is. You play it and go and do whatever you want. What makes this so special?
Yeah, I get that, but you gotta understand that the scale of this game was new for Zelda. And just the idea of the Zelda devs taking a Skyrim-esque approach, to put it in game journalist terms, was a beam of pure dopamine fired straight to the brain, and dismissed as nothing but a pipe dream of the fans Nintendo has built a legacy off of ignoring. And yet, they gone and done it. Not a single moment ever felt like wasted time while roaming through the seemingly endless plains of Hyrule. Every discovery leads to 3 more, every misstep from the set path begins a new quest, and brings you to a new corner of the wild that just completely encapsulates you. The most fun I've ever had came from when I cut the thinking short and just let myself go. You can start your day gliding from random high points, scaling mountains up and down, no real objective in mind, only to reach the top of a cliff and discover something waiting for you.
Johnny, rosin up your bow and play your fiddle hard.
You fight the thing, kill it, breathe in your victory, and collect his weapons and good stuffs, then walk 20 steps away to stumble into a seed puzzle. A chill, slow, thoughtful puzzle, followed by congratulations! Then you're off again. Back to the quiet wilds. Back to making your next small decision, because any of them can and will roll into another new objective. And that's just one series of events in a massive dynamic playing field with so many variables to consider at any moment. Frankly, there's no other way to say it. It's pretty wild. It feels real. It feels natural. The thing I really struggled to fully capture is just how much the scenery itself strikes me with complete awe. Everything here is just filled to the brim with a copious mixture of mystery and serenity. Whenever I pass something like an inexplicable chunk of a ruined pillar sticking out of what is otherwise an undisturbed plain, or a canyon carved into the earth, looking natural yet still somehow out of place, my mind races with theories of what happened, what could be done to learn more, expand upon this history, or even interact in some way with what has been lost. I remember early on I had a ton of fun just discovering location names and finding the references in their names. The same feeling comes from the opposite end of the sightseeing scale, with distant mountains and other large structures painting the background at all times. Thanks to Nintendo letting us know ahead of time that those mountains are very real and very climbable, everything you look at has that little extra incentive beyond it being an image in the distance. I can go there. I can go there! Most of your time here in Hyrule is spent climbing various cliff sides and mountains, and every time I reach the top of a good vantage point, every time I find myself literally on top of the world looking down at the fields of Hyrule and that piano kicks in, every single time without fail. Capping off any good quest, be it direct or arbitrary, should also be some actual rewards. No matter how good it feels, fighting and walking around would eventually feel a little needless if there wasn't anything to gain from it or anything to work towards. Most often you'll be collecting Korok seeds, wildlife materials, and orbs from shrines, which in turn you trade for more hearts and stamina. Then there's by far the most lucrative and abundant kind of treasure littered throughout Hyrule.
The weapons.
The arsenal at Link's disposal this time around is diverse, balanced, and encourages you to experiment with different fighting styles. From classic short swords and shields to claymores, spears, axes, hammers, magic rods, all sorts of fun tools of death. Boomerangs have been relegated from a core item that's always kept with you to a whole category of ranged weapons. Each different weapon type you use will change your approach and how Link can move in combat. I really have no strict preference between them because they each lend themselves beautifully to every fight, provided you use them correctly. And what use are weapons without opposition? Beyond Link himself, the variety of weapons has also shaped most of the enemies you'll encounter. Bokoblins and Moblins are like the cavemen or Neanderthals of Hylian civilization, minus the fact they're not extinct. Thus, they resort to clubs big and small, fitted with spikes and bones, or rusted swords left behind out in the battlefields. Lizalfos tend to prefer spears and boomerangs, slithering across the ground to jump out at you, striking from a distance or with a quick pounce. More tactile, slippery, and agile. I hate them. Then, we get the real powerhouse party crashers to deal with. Lynels can use swords, spears, clubs, shields, and bows to almost perfectly mimic Link's fighting style, and to show off their buff humanoid upper body. These guys are definitely my favorite to fight. It's always such an epic standoff when you first approach one, or see it in the distance with its mighty battle roar. But of course, they all meet the same fate. Breath of the Wild's weapons have given way to an incredibly expressive form of conflict resolution, never achieved before in a Zelda game, requiring your constant attention to everything around you when that anxiety-inducing piano shows up. Speaking of that piano, I didn't even mention Guardians. These things were based on how big the Octoroks were interpreted to be in Zelda 1, and were refitted with that Sheikah sci-fi fantasy theme, and boy howdy, these things are fun. At first, they're the biggest threat you can encounter apart from Lynels. However, unlike Lynels, these things are everywhere, even right at the start of the game in front of the plateau shrines. For the first half of your entire adventure, you'll be dodging and running like hell from these things, no matter the circumstances. Their laser beam eye can take out like 10 hearts in one shot. But then, you learn their weaknesses. A shot to the eye will stun them for a few seconds. I'm pretty sure that's just one of the 10 commandments, and I can't help but notice how weak and flimsy those legs are compared to the rest of you. Eventually, you find arrows and weapons made specifically for Guardians. Then you can truly raise hell and hunt them at your leisure. Moblins, Bokoblins, Lizalfos, Dalis, Hinoxes, Lynels, and Guardians, they will not hesitate to kill you. Denizens of Ganon's Malice, terrorizing other citizens of Hyrule.
They are rage, brutal, without mercy. But you will be worse. Rip and tear until it is done.
Link is an absolute war machine, launching arrows at multiple enemies in seconds before even touching the ground, or going mad with a barrage of strikes before a Bokoblin can follow through with a full swing of the club. Now, the first bit of criticism that always rears its head when on the topic of weapons is, indeed, their durability. All of them, including shields and bows, can only withstand a certain amount of usage before breaking. Early on, it can certainly feel like everything is a little too fragile, like every individual strike must be accounted for, or else you've already wasted the item before it's even broken. I too was initially kind of shaky about this idea, but in due time, not only did I start to gradually accept this system, but embrace it. After putting some time into it, I began to understand the flow that Nintendo was aiming for, and found myself with plenty of weapons at my disposal at all times. It began to click how to balance weak weapons with strong ones, and when to use which for what scenario. Even in the moments where I was left completely armless, I was motivated to experiment with other ways of attacking and scooping up weapons off of fallen foes. And sometimes, I was dissuaded from the fight altogether, and have to make a vow to return and enact my revenge. They sought to teach me a lesson, and I certainly learned it. When you're given a sword that works the same on every enemy, with upgrades to that weapon coming in increments throughout the game, it empowers you for sure, but it hardly feels like it was earned. Take Twilight Princess. Even my pre-Breath of the Wild Zelda love has this flaw. You begin with the wooden sword, perfect for the tutorial, nothing wrong there. Later, you end up with the Orden sword, which serves as a worthwhile blade all the way up until you find the Master Sword. From that point on, your blade does not change, improve, or diminish. It's only through the teachings of the hero's shade that your abilities further improve. And these lessons are an incredibly fun part of the game, as they tie together the lore of Zelda with mechanics by having a past hero bestow his knowledge onto the hero of today. But as great as their inclusion was, they still fell just a bit short of feeling like abilities that we've earned. There was no boss or obstacle in the way of these things, just a typical Zelda music puzzle and a tutorial for each move. Because they're given to you and only in a certain order, they feel more like tokens of progression instead of abilities you've studied and mastered. I will reiterate, story-wise, great idea, but just falls a little short of its potential. Back to Breath of the Wild, where the progression of your abilities seems to have taken the complete opposite approach. Now you're given all the items you need in the form of runes, you already have the combat maneuvers like backflips and shield parrying, accompanied by even more cool tricks like slowing down time with a perfect dodge, all immediately available to you. Now, finding better weapons is your reward for mastering this combat with your initial sticks and clubs, and by proxy finding awesome locations and stronger enemies that hold them. Instead of unlocking abilities for my all-powerful sword, I feel encouraged to master the abilities I already possess. And of course, it's impossible to talk about weapons in Zelda without further discussing the Master Sword itself. And as far as its use in-game, I think it's kinda logical how it works. It breaks just like any other weapon, but not permanently. Instead, it recharges after a few minutes. Clever enough idea. It then gives you a reliable weapon, yet you still need to find and earn it first, and you still have a penalty for overusing it. Not to mention it glows whenever you're around Guardians or facing one of Ganon's forms. Spoiler alert, I guess. And it'll deal double damage. And also, it'll, you know. All things considered, Breath of the Wild has such an amazing diversity when it comes to just about every element of combat that it enhances and weaves into the exploration seamlessly, rather than separating itself as a different mode of play. I believe The Legend of Zelda is at its best when it embraces the journey over the destination, utility and creativity, instead of just a means of progression. And because of that, with all of the parts at play, Breath of the Wild is my perfect Legend of Zelda.